If you think working the night shift is just about boredom and coffee, wait until you hear what happened to me at exactly 3:17 a.m. in a building that was supposed to be completely empty. Night shifts have a silence all their own, not peaceful but heavy and suffocating, like the walls themselves are holding their breath. I'd worked many nights before, but that one etched itself deep into my memory. No matter how much I try, I can't forget what happened. Tonight, I'm going to tell you everything, minute by minute, so you can decide if what I saw was human or something else entirely. It was a cold autumn night. Outside, a drizzle made the city streets shimmer under the flickering streetlights. I was the overnight security guard at a 10-story office building, most floors empty after 6 p.m. My job was simple: patrol each floor, monitor the security cameras, log my rounds, and ensure no unauthorized person was inside. The night started as any other: the low hum of fluorescent lights, the echo of my footsteps in the hallways, and the occasional sigh of the air vents. But something about the cameras told a different story. At exactly 1:42 a.m., I was in the control room, nursing a lukewarm cup of coffee when camera 6, watching the 9th floor hallway, suddenly flickered. For less than a second, I thought I saw movement. Not a shadow or dust, it was a figure. I rewound the footage, watching frame by frame. There it was, a tall, thin silhouette standing completely still, facing the far end of the hallway. No one was supposed to be there. I took the elevator up to the 9th floor. The elevator doors slid open, revealing a silence so thick I could hear my heartbeat. The air was colder here, noticeably colder. I stepped into the hallway, flashlight cutting through the dim emergency lights, scanning every corner. Nothing. No sign of anyone. Except at the end of the hall, the door to room 912 was slightly ajar. I knew for a fact it had been locked earlier. My training told me to radio it in. But my gut, my stubborn, overconfident gut, told me to check it myself. If someone had broken in, I could catch them, file a report, maybe even get a commendation. I pushed the door open. Inside was darkness. Not just absence of light, but a thick, heavy darkness. The room smelled faintly of damp concrete and something metallic. My flashlight beam wavered as it landed on the far wall. Long, deep scratches, vertical, claw-like marks etched into the plaster. Then I heard it. A soft, deliberate tapping from behind me. I spun around. The door, which I'd left wide open, was now nearly shut, just a narrow crack showing the hallway. "Hello?" My voice trembled. No reply. Just that tap tap tap, faster now, like fingernails drumming on wood. I stepped toward the door, heart pounding. Suddenly, the temperature dropped sharply. My breath puffed out in mist. The tapping stopped. Silence. I reached for the handle, and the door slammed shut with a deafening bang. I yanked on the handle. No luck. Static roared through my radio, drowning out everything. Through the noise came a whisper, my name. Slowly drawn out like a twisted game. Adrenaline took over. I rammed my shoulder into the door once, twice. It gave way and I stumbled back into the hallway. I didn't stop moving until I was back in the control room. I went straight to the 9th floor camera feed. The hallway flickered on the screen, and there, standing just outside room 912, was the figure. Closer now, facing the camera. It wasn't tall because of height. It was tall because its proportions were wrong. Arms too long, fingers unnaturally thin, head cocked to the side like it was studying me through the lens. Then, and I'll never forget, the figure smiled. Not with lips, but its entire face stretched and twisted, skin moving like a mask trying to imitate a human smile. The feed is cut to static. When the morning guard arrived, I told him everything. He laughed at first until we reviewed the footage. Every clip from the 9th floor between 1:40 and 3:20 a.m. was missing, replaced by a pitch-black screen. I never worked a night shift again. And room 912? I asked around. It hasn't been used for years. Official reason? Structural issues. The unofficial reason? No one stays there past midnight. Have you ever worked a night shift so terrifying you prayed for dawn? Tonight, I'm sharing the most bone-chilling night shift story you'll ever hear. When you think of night shifts, you probably picture quiet, uneventful hours or maybe a little boredom. But some night shifts bring more than just silence. They bring fear. Tonight, I'm taking you inside a true story from someone who worked alone in a remote facility, only to encounter something unexplainable. What started as a normal night quickly spiraled into a terrifying ordeal that still haunts them to this day. Stick around to hear every detail. You won't believe what happened when the lights went out. It all began on a cold autumn evening. Jake, a security guard at an old abandoned hospital-turned-storage facility, clocked in at 11 p.m. The building was massive, long, empty halls with flickering fluorescent lights and peeling paint. The kind of place where even the faintest sound feels amplified. Jake had worked night shifts before, but nothing quite like this. He settled into his routine, monitoring security cameras and making rounds every hour. Around midnight, he noticed something odd on one of the monitors, a shadow moving in a hallway that was supposed to be empty. Jake chalked it up to a glitch or a trick of the light. But then the power flickered. The entire building plunged into darkness for a few seconds before emergency lights buzzed on, casting eerie red glows. That's when things got worse. Jake's radio crackled with static, but he could swear he heard faint whispers, indistinct, almost like someone calling his name. He grabbed his flashlight and started his patrol, heart pounding. The facility was dead silent except for the occasional creak from the aging structure. When he reached the east wing, he heard footsteps behind him. He spun around, no one was there. Panic started creeping in, but Jake tried to stay calm. He radioed the main office, no response. His phone had no signal. He was completely isolated. Suddenly, the flashlight flickered and died. Pitch black. Then a cold breath brushed against his neck. Jake ran to the nearest exit door only to find it locked tight. The alarms that should have gone off remained silent. Trapped, he stumbled back into the hallway and saw something that froze him in place. A pale figure standing at the far end, eyes glowing faintly red. The problem was clear. Jake was trapped inside with something he couldn't explain, and his usual methods of escape and communication were useless. But this was just the beginning. The figure began to move closer, gliding silently but swiftly, and Jake had no idea what it wanted or why it was there. His mind raced. Was this a ghost? Some kind of intruder? And more importantly, how could he survive until morning? Jake remembered a small maintenance room near the stairwell. If he could make it there, he might find tools or at least lock himself in. Slowly, trying to stay as quiet as possible, he crept forward, the figure trailing behind but never making a sound. Inside the maintenance room, he found an old fire axe and a handheld radio. The radio was dead, but the axe gave him a small boost of courage. He barricaded the door, heart racing. For what felt like hours, Jake stayed locked in, listening to the sounds outside. The whispers returned, clearer now, voices speaking in languages he didn't understand, and the distinct sound of chains dragging across the floor. At one point, the figure banged on the door, causing the whole room to shake. Jake swung the axe wildly through the door, breaking one of the wooden panels. Through the gap, he caught a glimpse. The figure's face was twisted and grotesque, more nightmare than human. Desperation set in, but Jake refused to give up. He remembered the emergency exit was only accessible from the basement. The challenge was to get there without drawing attention. Gathering his courage, he sprinted out of the room, dodging the figure's pursuit. His flashlight flickered back on just in time to guide him through a maze of corridors and stairwells. Every shadow seemed alive, every sound amplified by the oppressive silence. When he finally reached the basement door, it was blocked by fallen debris. Using the axe, Jake smashed the obstruction, heart hammering in his chest. The figure's chilling scream echoed behind him as he slipped through the door. Jake burst into the cold night air, gasping for breath, the sounds of the haunted facility fading behind him. He looked back once. The building stood silent, but he knew something inside was waiting. He called the police, who found no sign of any intruder but did uncover old records revealing the hospital had been the site of mysterious disappearances decades ago. Some said restless spirits still roamed the halls, seeking justice or revenge. To this day, Jake refuses to ever work that night shift again, haunted by what he saw, and what he barely escaped. This true night shift story isn't just about fear. It's a reminder that some places carry shadows that refuse to fade, and sometimes the darkest hours are when the unknown comes out to play. Jake's experience shows how quickly a routine job can turn into a nightmare you never forget. You think working the night shift is just about being tired? What if I told you some shifts are nightmares you can't wake up from? Tonight, I'm sharing a true story from someone who worked the graveyard shift at a remote hospital. A story filled with eerie encounters, unexplained noises, and moments that pushed their sanity to the edge. Stick around because what happened that night is something no one expected. and it will haunt you long after the lights go out. The beginning of the night. It started like any other night. The hospital was quiet, the halls dimly lit, and the only sounds were the faint hum of machines and the occasional beep from monitoring equipment. Our storyteller, let's call them Alex, had worked night shifts before, but this was their first week at this old, almost forgotten hospital on the outskirts of town. From the start, Alex noticed the atmosphere was different. There was an overwhelming stillness that didn't feel natural. Even the night nurses whispered about strange things, unexplained shadows, doors opening and closing on their own, and patients waking up screaming from nightmares. The first strange encounter. Around midnight, while doing a routine check on patient rooms, Alex noticed a flickering light at the end of the hallway. It wasn't just a bulb going out, it seemed almost like a figure was casting a shadow. They paused, heart pounding, and saw what looked like a nurse standing by one of the beds, but as Alex approached, the figure vanished into thin air. Shaken but trying to rationalize it as a trick of light and fatigue, Alex continued. But the unease was settling deeper. Unexplained noises and moving shadows. Hours passed and the hospital grew colder. Not just a drop in temperature, an icy chill that seeped into the bones. Then came the sounds. Footsteps in empty corridors, whispers that couldn't be traced, and the unmistakable creak of doors swinging open slowly by themselves. At one point, the security camera in the nurse's station caught something chilling. A shadow moving against the wall, but no person in sight on the footage. Alex replayed it over and over, each time feeling more unsettled. The patient who didn't exist. Then came the most disturbing moment of the shift. Alex was called to check on a patient's room. The chart listed a Mr. Jenkins, who had supposedly been admitted for observation after a fainting spell. But when Alex reached the room, it was empty. No bed, no patient, no medical equipment. Just a bare wall and a cold draft. Confused, Alex asked other staff the next day, but no one had ever heard of Mr. Jenkins. The patient wasn't in the system. It was as if he never existed. The escalation. That night, the hauntings intensified. Lights flashed on and off, monitors beeped erratically, and the intercom would crackle to life with garbled voices. Alex found themselves trapped in a loop of fear, questioning what was real and what was imagined. At one point, their radio whispered a name repeatedly, Jenkins? Jenkins? But when Alex answered, there was only silence. The climax, face to face. Around 4 a.m. in the hospital's old boiler room, Alex experienced the climax of their night shift terror. They went down to check on a power fluctuation report and suddenly felt a cold breath on their neck. Turning sharply, Alex saw a pale figure, translucent and hollow-eyed, staring back. It was Mr. Jenkins. The figure spoke in a voice that echoed like a distant whisper, "Help me?" Frozen in fear, Alex managed to snap a photo with their phone. The figure vanished instantly, but the image remained, blurry, but unmistakably a ghostly apparition. The aftermath. Alex reported everything, but hospital management dismissed it as stress and exhaustion. No other staff would confirm seeing the ghost. But Alex knew what they experienced was real. They left that hospital job the next week and never worked night shifts again. What happens when the night shift becomes a battle not just against fatigue but against forces beyond comprehension? How do you stay sane when your workplace turns into a haunted trap? Alex's story isn't unique. Countless night shift workers, especially in hospitals, warehouses, or isolated locations, have reported eerie encounters. Experts say the mind is vulnerable during the graveyard hours, making it easier to perceive shadows and sounds. But what about the unexplained? Paranormal investigators point to residual energy, moments trapped in time repeating, or restless spirits unable to move on. In places like hospitals, where life and death intertwine constantly, these energies can be especially strong. For workers like Alex, the challenge is learning to recognize the difference between mind playing tricks and something truly supernatural. Many have developed rituals to protect themselves, from carrying talismans to reciting prayers, or simply refusing to be alone in certain areas. The key moment comes down to one terrifying realization. The night shift isn't just about surviving long hours. Sometimes it's about surviving the unknown. For Alex, that meant facing a ghost pleading for help and confronting their own fear in the darkness. Night shifts can be lonely and exhausting, but for some, they come with an extra dose of terror. Alex's story reminds us that the veil between worlds can sometimes thin in the dead of night, especially in places where life hangs in the balance. Whether it's a hallucination born of stress or something more, the night shift is a test of endurance, physically, mentally, and sometimes spiritually. If you want to hear another night shift story that's even more chilling, click the next video now. But beware, it's not for the faint of heart.